All right. Okay, so for my presentation, it's going to be of my observation of Lexeme modeling across different languages on Wikidata. So for this presentation, I want to let you know that why I proposed this is because for the last 3 years, I saw that lexicographical data model, it is very flexible by design, which means that there is no single correct way in doing or like adding lexemes. And on top of that, if we take a look at the number of documentation that presents, there's actually only 75 documented language on Wikidata, while actually there are more than 1,000 language that's present in lexicographical data. And every new language that wants to get added to LexData on Wikidata, they has to guess how they can fit in. So this session is going to be my observation on how language model like seems on Wikidata, and then also I will be focusing more into the friction points or like places where contributors and that also includes me in the beginning get stuck or also have to make divergent choices, and also lessons from all the differences that we applied in developing the tools. Okay, so what this session is not, this is not a best practice guide. This is also not a universal model. It's not a full overview of Lexeme schema. It's also not a replacement for documentation that's already present on Wikidata. And I also did not include like a comprehensive survey of all languages. Okay, so for everyone here, maybe you have been in a situation where you're going to model a language that isn't documented yet. And when you're going to do that, first thing that you're going to ask is what are the things that you're going to copy? And then also what are the things that you have to tweak by yourself, right? Yeah. And in doing so, and looking at different modeling across languages, I saw that there are so many frictions that happen in modeling like seems on Wikidata. Okay, so first is related with lexeme models. We have this assumption by default that lexemes has to be lexical element, that each lexeme has one or more lemma. Each lexeme will belong to exactly one language and also one lexical category. And each lexeme should has meaning that is stored as senses. It will also has inflected or variant forms that are stored as forms, and that we also assume that statements can exist at all three levels. And this very diagram over here, it always present on every single lexicographical data introduction. And it builds this implicit idea that every language can be described with the same structure, that it always has this uh, this structure for each different lexemes in all language. Okay, but our question is every lexemes on Wikidata actually always modeled consistently? And the answer is no. So the first differences that is very, very easy for us to take a look is related with lemma language tags. So for this, there is the assumption that each lemma will has one language tag, which means that it's going to identify the language of that string or of that lexeme. And in here, for example, we can see that for Japanese lexemes, there are multiple lemma, and we also saw that there are the same lemma, but it has a different language code. Okay, and even though we have that assumption, what happens in practice is that the contributors sometimes reuse the tag to encode other dimension. So, for example, with Japanese, they also encode whether that lexeme is present in certain spelling or not. So, whether there are some reform that has made in that language, and also the writing system that will be different. One is in Latin, the other is in Japanese script. And also, we also observe that there are also language which put register also as part of its language tag. So it results in this one field that describes everything all at once. And we can see that for the script variant in Japanese, there are in total 7 script variants. And for this, we actually really need to check again one by one whether there are some variants that can be substituted into another variants, or should we change or should we merge those. And also, this also observed in other language as well. Like as in Japanese language, there are a total 11 variants over here, and it also presents in Korean, which has 7 variants. And even though this ability to include multiple variants in one lexeme is something that's very useful to actually capture how each language are modeled, it also comes with consequences. So the first consequences is that we didn't have linked data entities for the language tag itself. So whenever, let's say we want to create a query, sometimes we have to play with doing regex on the language tags itself. And then after that, the second one is each community encodes variants differently. So one, and this also sometimes even happen on the same language, like one community members wants to use one exact code while the other community members want to use another code. And the third one is because of these differences, it is impossible for us to query or aggregate by script consistently. Like even for me as someone who edits Wikidata, sometimes I have to take a look first into what script variants that are actually used just to make sure that I can get the lemma. And imagine if such things happen, or like if someone that is not Wikidata editor but they want to build tools on top of Wikidata has to understand all of that. So that might makes it difficult for them to do that. And then the next one is because of this aspect also, when we are querying, we also have to account that the same lexeme that have multiple lemma will appear as different rows. So if you want to create or like gather the result directly from query, you might have to tweak something or like normalize the table first. And then next, still in the topic of language code in Indonesia, there are also a situation where there is an overcoding. So there are so many code for different spelling and different slang, internet slang, and street language. And because of this overcoding, the data in Indonesian itself are fragmented. And because this is fragmented, then it's also quite hard for us to just query the labels itself. So there are a lot of cleanings to do. And on top of that, if there is one query who assume that Indonesian will only use ID as the language code, that might miss some entries entirely, because some entries are coded with that special language tag. And this over apply private use tags needs to be discussed again with the community members, whether or not should we clean the tags, or making sure that we have a middle point between reuse and also adding the data itself. Okay. Okay. Yep. And then the takeaways from this is the language tag field is carrying unresolved distinction that belongs elsewhere, because now that language tag actually encode so many things in different language. And I will be curious if we take a look at each language and whether that exact code actually should appear, or should we minimize them. And then for the second friction, it is the assumption that each lexemes will belong exactly to one language. So for this, this actually happens also still in the Indonesian language. For example, in Wikidata as a language, we have different language for Indonesian, Malay, Banjar, and Minangkabau. However, when we take a look at the word, sometimes the same word may appear in several languages because of the connection between them. However, when we want to add new lexeme to Wikidata, we have to choose one correct language. And so even though that distinction might not come from a linguistic aspect, we still have to choose that. This is the sample for the word ayam. So ayam means chicken, and it's actually the same for all of this language. And they all share the same Malayan root, but for all of these specific language, people that spoke this language, there is a need to make distinction that yes, this is the word in the language that I spoke. And the consequences would be that the identical lexemes might be duplicated, or that can also result in deletion of the duplication itself across language. And sometimes the moderation will end up policing which community owns that word. However, this also comes with another consequences where user might lose motivation when their language identity is treated as a data error. So the takeaway for this is sometimes even though we know that the data itself is duplicated, then at the end of the day we have to look at the communities that the communities itself consists of people, and people itself have spoken their language, and language itself has also a dimension of identities and histories that ties into that language. And therefore, because of the current model, we have to come into a compromise. So let's say it's okay to have it duplicated as long as each language can also put their own senses and also more context that can enrich the reason why that lexeme exists on that language. Okay. And then the next one is the assumption that there is only one lexical category per lexeme. And for this, this also present in Indonesian, where many Austronesian and agglutinative language have this kind of base form. So, for example, the word ajar in Indonesia, which means teach, teaching, or learn, it means noun in some contexts, but it can also serve as a root for verb in others. However, if we tag it directly as just a noun or just a verb, that might actually lose half of its behavior. And that's for Indonesian, but for English, we can also show that they model it as something that has zero morph conversion. So they will exist two entries. So text as a noun, as a verb, and also chat as a noun and as a verb. And this current model forces people to duplicate the lexeme. Okay. And the consequences because of that, sometimes people duplicate things just to make it similar with English language. And then there are also still inconsistent usage of instance of that actually should be used for fine-grained categories, but not all language apply these statements. And then there are also some language that start inventing new lexical category items, like saying that root, base, or precategorial as its own lexical category. And because of these differences, if there is a tool that relies on lexical category, for example, if you want to have just a small drop down and take it from a scale category, it makes us cannot generalize that. Okay. And then the next thing is because of census on Wikidata. So the census itself right now is defined as something optional. Okay. And what happens in practice, we saw that census often missing altogether. We have a language that have zero census. We have people adding lemmata and forms, but they stop before actually adding the meaning itself. And another part related to the senses is there is sometimes a case of single sense overload. So there is this one generic sense that catch all multiple meanings in just one gloss. So sometimes we have seen that there is one sense with a very long gloss to capture all of that. And because of this overload, when they try to link it to item linking via item 40 cents, for example, it actually missed the points because it just become generic. Another part, we also see some gloss inconsistencies because another interesting thing is we saw, let's say, Lexemes in Balinese, but the senses in Balinese didn't exist at all. Like the gloss that exists is in English. This also often observed in underserved language because sometimes people are more hesitant to actually add meaning on their own language. And sometimes people choose the easiest way because if we just put English gloss in Balinese lexemes, for example, then we can just use the dictionary term for that. But if we want to add like the gloss in that own language, there is a need to have a more robust meaning for that. And that hinders people to add something on senses. And then next part is related with the property usage gaps. Because the senses itself are optional, of course, another link to item on Wikidata, for example, for verbs via predicate for, it's rarely used. And also for properties like translation or synonyms, it will also stay empty because there is no sense that they can attach to. Okay. Yep. So it happens because to define senses, especially in one's own language, it requires a bigger linguistic expertise, and sometimes the dictionaries that exist on that language also copyrighted. So this hinders people to add the senses. Okay. And then, okay. The consequences, if we have lexeme with zero senses, it means that it cannot be semantically queried. We also lose the meaning for that. And we also saw that the lexeme itself is isolated from Wikidata concept graphs. The next part is related with the forms. So for the forms itself, we have the assumption that each lexeme has one or more forms. And we also assume that each forms has grammatical features. For this, we think that, okay, in ideal situation for isolating language, it's going to have one form per lexeme. If for agglutinative language, it will have multiple forms, and the form layer should map the shape of words grammar. However, what happens in practice, there are also cases where forms missing entirely. And for this one, this also present in many lexemes, especially new language, that the forms are not documented or where people are confused in how to add the suffix or affix or the modification or variants of the forms, especially for language that didn't have tenses. And then even for English entries, for example, there is still another lexeme that didn't have the forms. And then for this thing, there are also situations where the forms itself is underspecified, so people just add the forms, but they skip adding the grammatical features because they didn't know what to add on that field. So sometimes when we see that Lexeme has different forms, we just assume that it has plural forms, but there is no machine readable indication that, hey, it is actually plural, for example. Yeah. And then there's also a situation over here where the forms are duplicated or being redundant. In here, this is for German lexemes. For example, for lexemes Klein, there are a total of 27 forms that has the same representation. And this also happened in other lexemes as well. And because of that, there are also multiple consequences. If it has 0 forms, then that lexeme cannot participate in inflectional queries. If there is no grammatical features, then the info of that will be unreadable to natural language generation. If there are so many duplication, it's going to be hard to validate. It will be hard to merge. And if it's incomplete, that the stats of that form would be meaningless. Okay, and for the last friction, this is related with the property use. And as we know that the property use will also be different across language, because sometimes one's language has their own interpretation about how to use one property. Like, for example, if for gender it means grammatical class in French, in Indonesian there are people who assumes that that should be natural gender, and for other, like derived from lexemes, some people put it as derivation chance, others use it for etymology. Another thing that often confuse people is about the location of certain statements. So the one that's most people make error commonly is the item for the sense and image, where they usually attach on lexeme instead of the sense level. And because of this, it's going to be hard to predict data behavior because the statements itself are all over the place, or sometimes it is not used accordingly to what it should be. And then from this, there are multiple lessons that we learn as a builder. So the first one is when we are building tools, we don't assume uniform structure. So the first assumption that we have is we only assume the absolute minimum. We didn't assume that everything exists, so we just assume that for if we are going to handle lexemes, what are going to present are lemma and then language code and lexical category, and that's it. Therefore, if we assume that, this kind of lexemes also can be handled by our tool. And then the second one is we want to make sure that because one lexeme can have multiple script representation, we want to show all lemma variants in one view. So we don't want to pick primary lemma, we want to show everything if we can. For example, that one is the lexeme for Bohlam, and we show both scripts. This is also example if for Japanese, for example, if there exists representation in hiragana, then all of the representation also has to be shown in the tool. And then the next part, if we want to, when we are building tool, we also have to minimize translation burden. And for this, our approach is to make sure that we use autonyms directly in the UI, because sometimes people overlook that each language can be represented differently. For example, if we are talking about German, and if we label it as German, then we have to make different representation. For example, in Indonesia, it will be Bahasa Jerman. In Turkish, it will be Almanca, and so on. And imagine if every single translate contributors have to also translate the language in the language that they spoke. That will be too much work. And that's why our approach is to just use the autonym for each language. The next part is for the property patterns for the language. We also make sure that there are multiple properties for the same concept. And for this, for example, if we want to check on whether this Lexemes has link or not to item, we don't just check item for sense, but we also have to check demonym of or hyperonym. And for verbs, for example, we didn't just check the predicate for, but we also check the troponym of statements for that. This is the example for the Lexemes, for the Lexeme calculator. Because this is a compound word, this compound word didn't have a one-to-one mapping directly via item for this sense. So it maps into an item via hyperonym, and then this hyperonym will then link to an item. So we have to check for this and didn't just edit duplicate links on such Lexemes. And because of that, this is the tool that we built based on that aspects. So Broomstick is a tool that can uncover gaps that present on Lexemes on each language. This is the example. If we are trying to find Javanese Lexemes on Wikidata, and we want to find which Javanese Lexeme that is missing item 40 cents. Okay. Actually, I only have 3 more minutes, so I will just go fast. For the established patterns to learn from, it's very important for people to take a look at the anatomy of a well-formed Lexemes that already present on the Lexeme showcase. These are the examples of the Lexeme itself. And then after that, for those that are starting from the beginning, you have to make sure that when you are creating Lexemes, there are several must-have items like having lemma, language, lexical category, and also senses in that language. And there are also things that is good if you put on that Lexeme. And then for the first 10 Lexemes also, what makes it easier if you're confused in which language or in which word you should start with, you can also start from lists that already being used. For example, use Swedish list or other high frequency words that are present on your language and start from that. Okay, and then for this, there are also this is also something that I find very useful is by finding our communities using the query database. So for example, if I want to find the Sundanese Lexeme contributors, then I can check on this query, and then if you want to adapt it, you just change the QID over here to find all of the contributors on your language. And this is also for the recent changes in the Lexemes that you are trying to edit. It also helps you to get a sense of how active the community is for that language. Okay, I think that will be it from me. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Raisha. That was amazing. Very, very interesting stuff. And thank you so much for staying up so late for us. I know it's got the most lively time in Indonesia right now. Questions? Abby, I see a hand. and emphasize on that. Accidental.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. Okay. Well, was there anything in the chat, gentlemen? All right. Then thank you again, Raisha. Really appreciate the effort. Oh, hang on. Wait.
No, thank you.
Yes, we have the question from Daniel Antle, who asked, does anybody know if there is a way to use the API to programmatically create Lexeme entities in Wikidata and especially on Wikibase?
Yes, you can edit Lexemes with the Action API, for example.
Yep. And we also have a question from A. Schmidt, who asks, I have a question on the future of Lexemes and Wikidata. Will these finally integrate and replace the language versions of Wiktionary into one? Are there any plans for this? That seems like no one knows the answer. But Nicholas mentions that thanks to wiki functions, there is some test currently done.